Now let's start with Ukraine, if we may, Scott. You saw all the Ukrainian flags flying in the American Congress. The America Firsters put Ukraine first, and Israel first, and Taiwan first, and they robbed the American workers of their tax money and sent it to doomed wars and cheered about it and imagined that that would be a good look as they waved another country's flag on the floor of the United States Congress, waving goodbye to the best part of $100 billion extra dollars sent to these wars. How did you see it?
Well, I mean, just that. This is the people's house. The United States Congress is sacred to the American people. It's the home of the implementation of the Constitution of the United States, that document that defines who we are and what we are as a people. It sets forth the principles and values of a nation. And so one would hope that when the American people elect a representative to go to the people's house, to the United States Congress, that they would behave accordingly. The sight of an American congressional representative waving the flag of Ukraine. And the reason why I raise my voice here is, you know, it's one thing to say that we are allies. I could imagine if, the British royalty or a British senior politician visit the United States, that maybe as a sign of solidarity, we would wave the Union Jack and say, hey, welcome to America. But that wasn't it. This was a celebration of the subordination of everything America stands for a nation that represents none of the values that we aspire to. Ukraine is not a democracy. I hope everybody understands that. On May 20th, the incumbent president, Zelensky, his term expires. There was no presidential election this year, although the Constitution of Ukraine mandates one. He claims he hides behind the specter of war. The last I checked, the United States held presidential elections during the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln defeated George McClellan. During the Second World War, Franklin Delano Roosevelt won an unprecedented fourth term. And I do believe that we were still in a state of war with Japan when Potsdam went down and Winston Churchill was sent home for losing an election. Elections take place in democracies, and we don't allow conflicts to stop it. In fact, if there's a war, that's all the more reason for there to be an election, because the people's voice must be heard. But in Ukraine, the people's voice has been silenced, replaced instead by this hateful ideology that links itself to the most odious person, one of the most odious people in modern history, Stepan Bandera, the progeny of Adolf Hitler, a man whose organization murdered Jews, murdered Russians, murdered anybody they deemed to be lesser people. This is a white supremacist government that is engaged in horrific crimes against humanity as we speak, and they have been robbing the American public, robbing the European public blind in a war that has nothing to do, and this is the irony of it all. This conflict has never been about preserving Ukraine. This conflict has always been about sacrificing Ukraine. And that is the epitome of the sickness of the Ukrainian people, that they can't recognize this. They were never going to win this war. No one ever believed they were going to win this war. The sole purpose of this conflict was to bring harm to the Russian people, to the Russian nation, sacrificing Ukraine in the vain hope that Russia would be so wounded by this conflict that there would be domestic political unrest that could bring down the government of Vladimir Putin. That is a forlorn dream. It's not going to happen. Vladimir Putin is strong. He has just been reelected. Imagine that, reelected. We call Russia a dictatorship. They held a democratic election, and the results are in. Vladimir Putin has been certified as the democratically elected president of Russia, unlike Zelensky. No, the Ukrainian people are dying by the droves. Look, the foreign minister of Ukraine, Kuleba, said it best. I think he finally had a wake-up call. He said there's no amount of military aid that can be sent to Ukraine at this juncture to reverse the tide of battle on the battlefield. The Russian advance cannot be stopped.
There's some graphics today in the British press, Scott, which say that these graphics represent Russia's summer offensive. Are you expecting an offensive, or will it be this steady incremental attrition that they've been following now very successfully over the last period? You expecting a big sweep?
The big sweep is happening as we speak. I mean, the nature of war. I've spoken with senior Russian generals who have all said the same thing. For those who are expecting big arrow offenses out of the Second World War, that's not how war is fought nowadays. The weaponry, the lethality of conflict is not conducive to that kind of action. You'll suffer too many casualties. Even a losing army like the Ukrainians, when equipped with the proper weaponry, can be very deadly. I remind everybody that the most deadly month of the war in World War II for the United States Army in Europe wasn't D-Day, wasn't June, it wasn't the Battle of the Bulge in December. It was April 1945, the last full month of the war. More Americans died fighting a defeated German army because the German army was fighting for its life. The Ukrainians are still a very deadly military force. The Russians know this. They're treating them with respect. I have yet to meet a Russian officer, a Russian soldier who has fought the Ukrainians, who has anything bad to say about the Ukrainians as military professionals. They all say that these are extremely tough troops, extremely brave troops who fight to the last bullet. They don't yield, they don't retreat, they don't surrender in general. And so the Russians respect this. I do see the Russians increasing the pressure on the line, and I do see them being prepared to take advantage of gaps as they develop in the line. But right now, what the Russians are doing is what they're going to do, maybe on a bigger scale, but it's basically putting pressure along the entire line of contact, waiting for the Ukrainians to break.